Can I get a motion, please, that the agenda for the February 8th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented? Councillor Sharano will make that motion. All those in favor? Motion carried, and we do have Councillor Byer joining us online today for today's meeting. Can I get a motion, please, of the minutes of the December 14th, 2021 Committee of the Whole meeting be adopted as presented? Councillor Taylor will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. We have a couple of delegations tonight. First, we have the Edson Seniors Transportation Society with Jennifer Gomez, Sung Young, Board President, and Jim Gamoka, Vice President of the Edson Seniors Transportation Society. And I believe Jim is going to be presenting to us here this evening. So welcome, everyone. Jim, you'll have to turn your camera back on.
How's that?
Perfect. We can see you, and I see Jennifer's on there. I don't see Sung. Oh, there he is. All right, take it away.
Well, Council, it's great to be here this evening, Your Worship and councillors, for our presentation. Of course, I think everybody there knows that I'd rather be on your side of the table than mine. I felt more comfortable over there. But we're decided quite some time ago as a council or as a group that we wanted to make this presentation to council just because there's been so many changes. So I think you'll see, you probably have a screen there that'll show you the bullets as they come up.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so I'll just proceed with that. The Edson Seniors Transportation Society, better known as ESTS, services seniors and other people in great need of accessible transportation in the Edson area. And I think that has been an ongoing thing. Everybody knows that this exists in the community. I don't think they know exactly how much work it takes to provide this service, but it's there. And we also had the opportunity to provide the service to a number of handicapped people. Currently, we have 95 members actively using our service. And I think that this is quite a substantial number, considering that with COVID and all of the other things that have happened in the community this last 2 years related to COVID, maintaining a strong members activity or a membership and activity in our service has been paramount to us. ETS has 2 accessible buses and 1 regular full-time driver, as well as casual part-time drivers that are available to serve people in the town of Edson. I think that it's common knowledge that we also have the second bus is accessible to people who are using it for such things as outings and needing to get to other activities. And so we're very happy to provide that, and it's something that we're quite proud of. Edson has a completely new board and hoping to serve Edson at an increased capacity. Now, I've not really been sure whether I wanted to introduce everybody because I think it's time consuming, but I'll run through the list of the people that are on the executive and the board. The president, of course, you know, is Sung Young, and he's been doing an admirable job and guiding us as we go forward. Of course, I'm the vice president. Sherry Brown, you know, I think most of you who have anything to do with Scope will know who Sherry Brown is. Sherry's our treasurer and has a vast knowledge of nonprofits. So she's very, very intricate to our operation. Mary Brown is, I just about missed Jennifer. Jennifer Gomez, who's in attendance tonight, is our secretary. And she's also been doing a lot of other jobs, and I'm sure that she does more than most people expect of her. But Jennifer also works with the daycare center in town here. Mary Brown is one of our directors, and she's a director of venues. And when we're doing things such as trivia night, Mary will be involved in that. One of our stronger directors is Clarence Jolly, and I don't think Clarence needs any introduction. Most of you know him. And he's the Director of General Operations and Business Development. And he's the one who's had to hit the ground running, and he's been doing very, very well. Christy Gamoka is our Director of Grant Writing and Fundraising. I don't think anybody's surprised at the fact that she's in that capacity. She's displayed the ability to do very well at that. And she's the intricate part also of our operation. And Trevor Gunson is Director of Membership and Volunteers, which is going to be busy for us because we're trying to increase our membership, plus we would like to increase our volunteers. So it's going to be, he's going to be busy as we move forward. New business and priorities for 2022 is hiring an executive. Now, one of the weaknesses of this organization, as we see it at this point, was that there wasn't a full-time or part-time executive assistant that would be able to look after the day-to-day operation. Most of that fell to the members on the executive or the board, and I think it became a weak point in the organization. So that's one of our main goals, or one of the things that we would like to achieve this year. Building sustainable, transferable, publicly engaged organization. So even though everybody knows who we are and what we try to provide to the community, it's still, we have to get out and explain to them some of the things that we would like to accomplish going down the road. So it's going to be a part of our operation that we feel is very important. Increased ridership. As time goes on, we would like to see our ridership enhanced and become more of a everyday option for people in the community. And I think that that's very, very important. Building community partnerships like the town of Edson and other public agencies and nonprofit or for-profit businesses. Now, I should include here that the town of Edson has been a huge supporter of this organization, and it's without you. And I'm not just talking from the funding side. I'm also from the side that you support us in other ways, such as insurance and fuel and things of that nature, which makes our job so much easier. Digitized, accessible documentation for transparency. I think transparency is a huge thing throughout pretty much every organization that exists anywhere in the province or in the country. And I think that it's something that we have to be very conscious of and work hard towards. Develop a volunteer pool. There's a lot of work that goes into a lot of different portions of our operation, and having volunteers in there to take up some of the work that we're being, we try to get done in the community is really important. So getting good volunteers is going to be important. Do you have any questions about that to this point?
Not at this point, Jim. You can continue on and we'll ask the questions at the end.
Okay, all right, that's fair. So now we're moving on to the budget side, and this is where from time to time when I get myself into trouble here with these numbers, I'm going to be turning it over to Jennifer. She's very well versed in the budget. First off, I should explain that you see the numbers for 2021. And we've now recognized that because we had no input, there isn't anybody than the executive or the board who has had any input into the 2021 budget. We recognize that there was a lot of activity, but we don't know exactly how it came together. So we've kind of decided that this was not something that we were going to focus on. What we want to really focus on is our new budget for 2022. This is going to be the basis for everything that we do in the future and how we move forward. And so we have a number of things that in the budget that are they're not really self-explanatory, but we have a number of key issues that we want to make sure that we accomplish. One of them is we have to put together a decent strategy for replacing the buses. And I think this is very, very important because it's a huge expense. And if we're not prepared for it down the road, we're going to be scrambling, especially if the buses start to become a problem mechanically or just generally, age resistant. So basically, we're building a reserve. We're putting a decent amount of money into reserves so that in the next 5 to 6 years, we're going to be seeing a change or a purchase of at least one new bus. And the other main factor in our budget right now is that temporary executive assistant, or however, whatever title that person would get. It's going to be something that we don't know whether we are going to be able to achieve other funding, but we're including it into a part of our budget. So as you see this, and I suppose getting to the bottom line, because that's exactly where you want to go and you want to know what we're trying to present, is that we feel that in order to achieve the things that we need to do, we are looking at funding of about $50,000 from the town of Edson. So not having gone to that point worth the need, I would like to ask you if you have any questions.
All right, well, thank you very much for that presentation, Jim, and big thank you to your board who have undertaken a big project, all new faces. I know it's been a challenging time, but I really want to send our appreciation to you and the rest of ESTS. So we'll open the floor to questions here. First of all, since Councillor Byer is on the line, do you have any questions, Councillor Byer, at this point?
I don't have any questions at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Chenard.
Through the chair to Mr. Gomolka. Now I know what gray hair looks like on the screen. Thank you for showing up there. Just a comment. Was that an ask of 50,000? Can you explain that right at the very end? I didn't quite hear that.
Yes, that's exactly right, Councillor. That is what we've come down to at the bottom line, is that's what we're asking for, is $50,000. Now, we also, if we're successful in being able to achieve that $50,000 funding from the town of Edson, it would be optimal to us to make it a 3-year agreement. Because if you look back at the way the whole transportation system has been handled, it's been almost on a year-to-year basis, and there's never any future planning, nothing. It was never in place that they were secure in their funding moving forward. It was always in a position of trying to achieve more money through different options. And I think that it was probably one of the weaknesses that they dealt with.
Just one follow-up.
Just one follow-up, Councillor Short.
Through the chair to Mr. Gamoka, so the 50,000, is that over and above right now? Because I can't see the screen, because I believe, are we still giving you a granting of 30,000 a year plus the fuel and insurance?
Yes, that would be over and above.
And you're asking for 3 years, and that money would mainly be for the bank money for a new bus, if I'm correct? Is that what the thinking is?
Primarily, it would be to support the purchase of, see, we have two buses and they're 2 years apart in age. One is used more extensively than the other. But we are going to have to, and I would think that probably within 5, 6 years, maybe even shorter, we don't know operationally how secure these vehicles are, but we do know that they are at this point providing the service that we want. But we have to be able to put that money aside for those buses.
Councillor Shedard and then Councillor Moore. Or sorry, Councillor Pisichny and then Councillor. I apologize, Councillor
See what
Pisichny.
happened? Not too much.
He's been assaulted before.
Thanks. Actually, Councillor Shedard actually asked the question I was going to ask on it, but maybe I'll just make a quick statement. I do know from my job that how utilized these buses are in our community. So I like the business plan, and so I'm guessing that would be a total of an $80,000 a year grant. Is that correct? If it's 30 now. And
I'm sorry, I didn't get that number, Councillor.
So Councillor Pisichny was just asking if you would be asking for an annual grant of $80,000, the 30,000 that's existing. I'm not sure if that number is accurate or not, plus another 50.
No, actually, what we're looking at is the total of 50,000 over 3 years. That would be each year.
Okay, so 50,000 a year for 3 years, total all in, plus the insurance and the fuel that we provide.
Yeah, we've never incorporated that into our budget. And I don't know why, but it's just something that has never been, we know that it's there. We know what that it's it has a dollar value. I'm not sure exactly. I could probably go to Jen here and she may have an answer for you on that. Jennifer, are you there?
I am. Yeah, the town currently covers the insurance cost for the buses, and we pay initially, and then you guys, the town of Edson reimburses us for it. So that's why it hasn't really been in the budget. I didn't have it planned as part of the budget because it's not that it's a wash and that it's always guaranteed, but it's just something that haven't been a cost to ESTS at this point.
Thank you. Just one follow-up there, Councillor Pisichny.
not just on the fuel. So we reimburse them. We don't have them on our fuel cards.
No, that's for insurance. So fuel is on fuel cards. Yeah. Councillor Moore.
Yes, to the chair, Jim. One of the goals is to increase ridership. Does that perhaps include not just seniors, but members of the public? And if not, how do you endeavor to attract more ridership for the buses?
It's a very good question, Councillor Moore. At this point, our focus is primarily on providing service to the elderly as it has been in the past. Recognizing that the ridership can be expanded to people with handicaps, which is already in existence. It's something that's already happening. We have sat down and looked at projecting a plan into the future of how we see our busing system unfold. It's going to take a number of years to get there. I think right now, what we want to do is focus on the service that we're providing and make sure that it's going to be reliable and something that's going to be cost effective for the community. And I think that that's primarily where we're at. Now, to tell you who we would focus on for additional ridership, I would think that it's pretty much going to be open to anybody who finds that they need a transportation to a location, and we can provide it. But That would be the quick and easy answer that I could give you right now.
Councillor, if I may add on to that.
Sure, go ahead, Simon.
Yes, thank you. That there are many newcomers to the town, and also there are people who does not have a economical opportunity to own their own vehicles. And we are hoping to provide those services for those agencies, especially when, let's say, a mother with many children reach to their educational programs for their children, or the newcomers trying to get to town buildings for their English courses or other upgrading educational opportunities, or even trying to get to when the bus arrives from the Edmonton, Sundog bus arrives from the Edmonton. Some people may not have the waiting, the pickup personnel waiting for them. So if we could provide those services in future, I think it'll help to many people integrate our societies, and also we could increase our ridership. That is our first plan. And then over the years, if there's any chance that we can expand it to connect with other transportation system, if there's any further development in transportation system regionally, that is our next plan. So that is our over next few years plan.
All right, thank you very much for that. Councillor Byer and then Councillor Bennett.
Thanks. Through the chair to Mr. Gamoka, or the presenters. My question is, what are the current hours of the bus, and will the executive personnel be able to help make adjustments to that if you find that they're needed? I'm just looking for some clarity on that, please.
I can answer some of your question on the hours. I can't tell you, well, actually, I can't tell you the hours either, but we have situations in the community where, and I know of one instance where a gentleman or a lady are on dialysis, and their need for transportation falls outside of the general scope of our hours of work. But yet, we still try and provide that service to them because there is no other way for them to get to their appointments. The hours of work, I would have to either have Sung or Jennifer explain exactly our hours of work.
I see Jennifer with her hand there. Jennifer.
Currently, she operates the bus from 8 to 4. The other part of our ask isn't just for the executive personnel, but it's also for a part-time driver. I know that there are times where, because the one full-time driver we currently have, she doesn't get a break. She's the one that is always there. She books all of the appointments. She does all the pickups, drop-offs, and just to have somebody else there to know that we have that backup person when and if it's needed is also something that we are looking at doing or having, so that we can provide, maybe give her a couple of days off when she hasn't had one before. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But even with that, if the ridership increases, because as Mr. Gamoka indicated, is that we've come on during COVID. So of course, ridership has dropped off because you can only do so much. Whereas going forward, and hopefully things will stay positive and continue to move forward, where some of the restrictions will come off and we will see increased ridership. We will see more of that. So that is where we would be able to utilize that part-time driver as well. I know currently in there it shows a maximum of 10 hours a week, but that might be 20 hours one week, nothing the next week, and 20 hours the following week. So it depends on what that all looks like when it all rolls
Thank you, Jennifer. Councillor Bevan.
Thanks, Jim. And trivia night has always been a big night for the ETS and that, and you're always looking for volunteers. I suggest that you approach the town for volunteers because council passed 5 volunteer days paid. So you need help. I think you should get a hold of the town and see if we get some volunteers there. And there's a lot of people in the town here that could volunteer for you guys. It makes you guys $10,000 or more a season. And I think that's one way we can get some volunteers out there.
Yes, Councillor Bevan, and thank you very much for bringing that up because that was a part that I had omitted to make a comment on, was the trivia night. Now, we were looking very seriously at getting a trivia night done in March, which is not realistic at this point because of the organizational times. And plus, we don't know exactly how the relaxation of the COVID rules are going to be applied to us. But at the same thing, in the same, what we're still looking at is getting trivia night done, maybe in June or somewhere in that area. We think that we still have time. We could still probably do that. Recognizing what you said is very accurate, is that it is a big money maker. It's a funding opportunity for us in excess of $10,000, and it helps us substantially. It also loosens up our ability to look at when we're doing purchases or operational things. We know that we have that ability, so that is great. And the offer of volunteers, as you know, those are things that volunteers are very precious to us. We're all volunteers, and we would be more than welcome to have even his worship show up and volunteer.
I think I've been voluntold. All right, Councillor Taylor hasn't spoken yet. Go ahead.
So thank you for your presentation, Mr. Gamoka. And I love the direction that you're taking the organization, including increasing ridership and finding new ways or opportunities for people who wouldn't necessarily have that transportation. I think it's great. To your ask of the grant, in the chance that the town and council is unable to provide this funding, do you have any alternative sources of funding that you're looking at right now? Any other grant funding or sponsorships you might be looking at in the chance that the town is unable to provide this?
Yes, and as you know, when you're asking for funding, it's never a guarantee. So we recognize that. So there is going to be opportunities for fundraising and trying to come up with other revenue. At this point, I couldn't tell you exactly what it is, but we do have people in the community who have come to us with donations and support. And so if we were not successful, it is definitely going to impact us with the possibility of putting enough money into reserve for the new buses. And it's also going to probably give us a second thought about how we're going to utilize a part-time employee and a casual and an executive director.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So thank you very much for the presentation once again, Jim. My question is, I'm really happy to see that you're putting money or try to put money aside for a new bus. That was, something that concerned me in the past, that, those are very expensive, and then to hit either the municipality or the organization all at once without any money on the side, I think is very challenging. So I like this new direction. I like to see that you're also looking at doing additional advertising on the buses. I think there's a huge opportunity there. My question has to do with ridership fees. Obviously, we want to ensure that this is affordable, especially for those low income and seniors who are on fixed income. But the reality is As you know, expenses continue to increase, especially in some of the areas like insurance and fuel, and I know the town covers that for you. Is there any discussion on gradually increasing fees to help raise some additional revenue?
Well, at this point, and being a senior and recognizing how seniors try to deal with increasing anything, we're going to be very sensitive on how we go about that. I think we're comfortable with what we're providing now, but we do know, or I think we know, that we're going to be needing to increase that in sometime in the future. But we also have to be conscious of the fact that we're not only dealing with seniors that are affluent and have the ability to do this sort of purchase for a membership or a pass. So we're going to be very sensitive with that, but we are probably going to review it.
Okay, thank you. And you made a comment during the presentation, and it's the same thing as you know municipalities are faced with, is that sustainable, long-term, predictable funding. It's something that we often lobby for. So whatever we do or however much we're able to hopefully support you with, I do hope that we were able to do so on a longer term plan to at least give you the chance to stabilize and provide this service and focus on those areas of increasing rideability and increasing revenues. And as I mentioned before, I think sponsorship is a huge opportunity for you. Anybody else have any further questions? Councillor Chenard.
Just a few follow-up. At one time, the seniors transportation, the age limit was 45. Did we advertise that thing? Because they call it seniors, but it goes to 45 years of age. And the other one was, I'm going to butcher your name, the president, Sue Sung. I like your comment about some of the things. So in some cases, if people can't afford, I would not be in favor of that. There is taxi service, but I do like the idea. There has been in the past, people are looking for 7 days a week. So people joining the buses coming through from doctor's appointment at 6, 7 o'clock at night. I think we should be able to advertise and somehow fund that better. So someone's coming in that are, I'm going to say, disabled in some way, shape, or form, that it was asked the bus and there wasn't the person's available. And then the other one, I don't know if you answered these, just comments. I noticed your total salary is $40,000 a year. That's extremely low. We should maybe go up to, up to 60,000, then you can pay a higher wage. And the one comment, one driver, that's too much to ask of a person because they do need time off. So it's just a few points. You don't have to answer them now, but you're on the right path. There's just a couple of points. I was on the board years ago, so I have some of this background information.
Thank you very much. Councillor.
Thank you very much for that.
All right. Any other further comments? Councillor Bevan.
Through to Jim and the board there. Are you guys still going to go ahead with your raffle tickets?
Yes, as a matter of fact, and if you see on the screen that Jennifer's got a big smile on her face. We are struggling right now with just getting the final paperwork done, and then we will be being able to complete the application. And once that's done, then we just pick a date when the raffle will proceed. And as Councillor Bevan has indicated in the past, that the trade show that comes up, there's the opportunity for us to have a booth. And if that's the case, then we want that raffle to be in conjunction with that and other things that we would like to be able to provide at that time.
Councillor Bevan.
Just to follow up to that, Jim, you guys do have a booth in the trade show and it is paid for. So you can use it. If you don't, just let me know so that it can be passed on to somebody else.
Thank you very much for doing that also, Councillor. It's greatly appreciated, and all the support that you give us while you're sitting at our meeting table, and the representation you have between us and the town is greatly appreciated.
You're more than welcome.
All right. Well, thank you once again for your presentation. As you know, things are very tight for us, as they always are, but we certainly will take your information. Have you shared that budget with Tanya or anybody here at the town?
I haven't personally, and I don't think Jennifer has either or some, but I know that Clarence has spent some time with Tanya, and she's very aware of what we're trying to accomplish. And I think that Clarence has probably kept her in the loop on how we're trying to proceed forward.
I see Ms. Byers is on the screen there. Go ahead, Tanya.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I've definitely had the pleasure of working with the previous board and now this new board, and Clarence has been somewhat keeping me up to date. I didn't see your final budget, but I've definitely seen some of the work that you've been doing. It's great to see. I also will provide just a little clarity to council on how the funding model kind of has worked for the town of Edson through ESTS in recent years. So there is the component where, you know, the gas and insurance is paid. And just for the last 3 years, in 2019, it was about 12,000. 2020, it went down to 11,000. And that was just ridership due to people not moving around as much during the pandemic, probably. And now in 2021, we're already seeing an increase. It was up to 15,000. So, you know, it's nice to see people are starting to move around again. And you know, even just with the new board, that things are going well. I budgeted this year is 16,000, but as we know, you know, we can see that this is trending upwards, and that's just, you know, with the gas and the cost of gas is going up as well. So we can see that probably increasing. The other portion of the funding that ESTS has gotten over the years from the town of Edson is through what's called the transportation grant. And so every year around May, it goes out in the paper requesting people to apply for it. And so ESTS every year, they apply for this funding, and then it's been divvied up between ESTS and 2 other organizations in town, you know, for the last few years. So last year in 2021, they received 15,500 from that transportation grant. But again, it's not, you know, sustainable long-term contract funding, right? It's something they apply for every year and can't necessarily count on, even though it has been fairly stable. I just, wanted to clarify a little bit so that there's a good understanding of, you know, how the financing has been working through the town. And, you know, also just want to really show my appreciation to the board for everything that you're doing. I know how much time and work that you put into this. And, you know, it's really nice to see that, you know, you're looking at expanding service and finding, you know, new and different ways to really reach the ridership that requires it. So, thank you all.
Thank you very much for that, Tanya. And if I could just ask that you guys do send a copy of that budget. It was hard for us to see on the screen here. So as we're having our budget deliberations, we can have a closer look at that. Councillor Schnurr, anything new?
Yeah, something new through the chair to Tanya. Tanya, I see the numbers of 12 and 15,000. At one time, it used to be the provincial government had a grant, and so many years ago when that ended, the town of Edson decided to give the seniors transportation bus carry on at 30,000 a year. So I'm hearing the low numbers. I'm wondering where that changed from 30 to applying for 12 or 15.
Through the chair to Councillor Chenard, I actually, that must have been before my time. I wasn't aware of the provincial funding. So I'm sorry, I can't speak to that.
Okay, I was just curious on it because it used to be 30 and I can't remember the time frame. I think Jim was still in council then when the government canceled.
Yes, Councillor Schnurr, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
No answer.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next presentation. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight.
All right, we are moving on to a shelter pods update. And we do have Erica Snook-Pennings with the Edson Friendship Center here, as well as other members of the Shelter Pod Committee. I believe we have Staff Sergeant Delisle and Anne Oriette from the Edson Recycling Depot. So take it away, Erica.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So yes, I am one of the original committee members. Just to be clear, the original committee has dissolved, but originally we were myself and Oriet, Staff Sergeant Delisle, and Christine Gillum from Alberta Health Services. So we came together last fall and began the process of looking for grant funding and developing the model to move forward at the Recycle Depot. We started our building process in December, trying to look for the building permits. We had anticipated at that time that it would move along a little quicker, well, actually significantly quicker than it did. Unfortunately, we encountered a lot of setbacks from the beginning, with the building permit taking way longer than we had anticipated. Then we had cold snaps. We had somebody come in and rip out all the wiring. We had parts that came that were wrong and that were longer coming in the first place due to COVID. Then we were delayed again to get that piece coming again. So unfortunately, we didn't actually open till June 15th. At that time, the 4 committee members were responsible for all the operational parts, all the, what's the word I'm looking for? So like developing all the protocols, all those pieces. So we were handling all that, as well as letting people in at night. And initially we had started with the idea that we would have an on-call phone during the night that would be on all night long. That quickly ended within a couple of weeks because it just was not sustainable. I think we only had 2 of the committee members go through that. And then it came to me, and it was horrid. So we moved that down into a 2-hour time frame for people to access the pods. We continued with that till the end of August. Actually, we continued with that till September. We brought on 2 more committee members actually in August. A lady that works with me in my office who is finishing her social work diploma at the time, as well as, and that was Sherry Bessler. And then we had Colleen Talpash from Victim Services come on. We were finding that it was very labor intensive and heavy, like it was a lot of heavy carrying, trying to deal with the pods and the clientele. So we needed 2 extra committee members to help out. At the end of September, we found a group of about 17 individuals who are willing to volunteer a week at a time to allow clients access to the pods at night. And then we just, the 6 of us continued to be just on call during the night if there were any issues that came up, and then continued on with the daily operations of the pods. So that basically continued on until December 6th, which was when we encountered a few issues. Pods ended up being closed then for about a week's period of time. And then Reflections came forward at that point as of December 17th, and they took over the operations of the pods, and our committee then dissolved. So we did encounter a few issues along the way, things that we weren't anticipating totally, but realized that we're a bit of a challenge in terms of dealing with the client base. And they're all listed in the report. So things like a lot of things within the pods themselves, we really needed to have had just 4 simple walls because there were issues with individuals tinkering with the heating, the USB charging port that we had there, removing screws from the heating vent, trying to get into the pods. So we had to weld on some plates in front of it, items being left outside, items being left inside. So like there were quite a few things that we had to work through during that process. So, sorry, I'm just going to flick over my sheet here. So yeah, we operated those pods, that committee of 6 until December 6th. I have listed some statistics from that time frame. So we were open for a total of 175 days. Considering that we had 5 pods, which were meant for single occupancy, which unfortunately wasn't always occurring. But if you take the 175 and multiply that by 5, you get 875 possible stays. During that time frame, we saw actually 960 stays. So that means we had 960 bodies during that time frame in the pods. And 50 of those individuals, like there were 50 unique individuals who used the pods during that time. About half of those individuals are known to be chronically homeless. And that information is coming through me primarily. So I know the bulk of the clientele that are using the pods through my job. We were seeing a lot of over like more than one individual in a pod. About 12 of those 50 individuals are using the pods on an ongoing basis. And then there's probably about another 10 of those individuals that were episodically using. So they would find somewhere to couch surf or might be out of town for a little bit of period and then come back and use it. So they weren't consistently using it. But definitely about 12 of them that were very, very consistent in that usage. So the bulk of the cost of the build was covered through Rural Development Network, through a grant from the federal government called Reaching Home. So the initial money that came from the town of Edson that we were anticipating would cover the build, we actually didn't have to use that because I think we got $105,000 from that Reaching Home grant. And then when Reflections took over the operations, they had applied through the provincial government and they accessed some COVID money that goes till the end of March. So the money that we actually were granted from the town of Edson is actually still sitting in trust, for lack of a better word, with the Edson Friendship Center. So we're still holding on to that until such time that Reflections doesn't have any of that grant money because they have to use their money by the end of March. So the response in general from the client base about the pods has been extremely positive. Because I continue to see those individuals in my office, a lot of them, they are quite happy to be able to have somewhere to sleep. Like I said, many of them are chronically homeless, so don't have any other resources. So without the pods, they would be sleeping outside. And we're still having some of that. Like I have some clients that still are unable to access the pods because, and still people are this are actually sleeping rough. So
Okay, can you just repeat that last few lines there? You broke up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. I said that what did I say?
The ones that aren't able to access the pods, what are they doing?
Oh, sorry, they're sleeping rough. So I have clients currently who are sleeping outside that because the pods are full, they're finding places to hunker down. And because the weather isn't terribly cold right now, they've found some places in the community to sleep. So I think that sort of covers most of the pieces that sort of gives a general overview, I think, of sort of where things were, what we encountered, and where they're at now.
All right, thank you very much, Erica. Anne or Christian, do you have anything you want to add? I think everybody's okay then. All right. So we'll open the floor to questions. Councillor Chouinard, go ahead.
Through the chair, just so I understand, and you're probably not responsible, but what I'm hearing, there's 12 regular people, but there's only 5 pods. So in a matter of speaking, to suit the needs, we'd have to double the size of the pods. Would that be a capability?
Well, I guess it depends on how you want to look at that in terms of, so the pods are not capable of handling technically the need. However, my assessment would be that there are individuals using those pods that don't need to be accessing emergency shelter, that actually could be accessing, if it were available, transitional housing. I think we're always going to have a need for those pods because we're going to have high needs individuals that may be in transitional housing and then exit due to barriers or issues. But I actually don't think we need specifically more pods. I think there needs to be a focus on transitional housing so that we can move people out of what my perception is a cycle, right? So they're sleeping at the pods, and then they're going to reflections. And then if there's social work needs, reflections refers them over to our office. So people are sort of caught in this cycle and not really moving forward. So we're maintaining life, but I wouldn't be advocating for more pods. I'd be advocating for transitional housing, unfortunately.
All right, Councillor Moore.
To the chair, to Erica. I'm sure you probably heard the saying from some people that some people want to be homeless. What is your reaction to that?
Not anybody I'm working with. I think when you tell people, so, I mean, people are homeless for a variety of reasons. So, and some of those reasons are substance abuse disorder. So when we have placements that say the only way you can live here is if you stop using any type of substance, then they're not going to be successful. And in that instance, they may say, well, I'm not going to be successful, so I'm not going to go into that placement. So then I think we need to be looking at sort of a harm reduction model where we keep people safe, but keep them housed. But does that necessarily mean that they want to be homeless? I don't think so. I mean, maybe that's a different situation in the state because that's a much bigger issue. So I don't have access to that information, nor do I have access to those individuals. So, but in terms of speaking for the clients that I work with in Edson, I don't think we're going to find any of my clients that are going to tell you I'd rather be homeless.
Thank you. All right, anybody else have any further questions, comments? Councillor Bevan.
Yes, to Erica. I know those pods are small and that, and you had mentioned that you have 2 people staying in there. Is that a problem, or would you let the 2 people stay in there because when our weather hits -30 below, they need a place to go, and if they're willing to put 2 people in there, is that acceptable to you guys?
So we get caught. I mean, we were because again, I'm not operating them, but you get caught in a little bit of a situation that technically the fire code says 1 person per pod. However, when we were operating them, we would just have a quick word in the morning saying, you know, guys, like you're supposed to be 1 per night. That's it. I mean, because ultimately, who is going to allow their neighbor or their friend to freeze outside when it's super cold? So, I mean, there were mornings that we showed up and there were 3 in a pod. So we just sort of had a quick word with them and.
Yeah, and if I can follow up on that, Erica, actually the numbers were even greater last month. So for the 30 days, it was close to 300 people. So 2 people per pod given, and some were more because it was so cold. So Reflections allocate 1 person per pod, but in the morning, as you say, you go there and you find more. So Reflections, as they tell me, they have to do a report every morning to the homeless supports where they got the funding from as to how many people were there and how many people were at Reflections. So they have to keep a daily count, and usually it's an average of at least 2 people per pod. What was asked is that we had to send in for exemptions to public health for having that over capacity, because capacity is 5 people per night or 150 for the month. So we had to send in for an exemption from public health for that as a homeless shelter in winter because of extreme cold. And so we were granted, or Reflections was granted that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I have two comments and then a question. My first comment is to Ms. Pennings in terms of your comment on transitional housing. That's something I'm supportive of and would like to see certainly in our community as certainly a need in our community. I agree that shelter pods is emergent, but now we need to find transitional ways to get people from a homeless situation into more stable housing. I agree with that, and thank you for bringing that up here tonight. The second thing, I want to thank this committee's work for getting this spearheaded. This is a tremendous need in our community. I know that you went through a lot of adversity in terms of, especially I think in late November, early December, when there was issues in terms of spacing, and then there were some concerns from the public regarding safety around the recycle depot. And I know that takes its toll on the volunteer group. So thank you for your work. Thank you for getting this set up. This is such a need in our community. My question was to your report when you talked about due to the need for shelters surpassing the availability of pod space, clients accessed and slept in the recycling depot plastics building and other recycle spaces as overflow space. How are these individuals accessing this space?
If I can answer, they would climb through the door and sneak in. They were always there prior to the pods. I mean, we would find them in shredded paper and in bins and other places. They would find ways and means of accessing them though. And if I can update it, since the last month, since Reflections has taken over it and actually has a surveillance 6 hours a night of someone actually being physically here in a vehicle, that has markedly decreased. And it has been a little bit more enforcement. And because of the grant that Reflections was able to get in March, they have secured 2 days a week of a homeless coordinator, which is Marcia Jensen, who is working on that next step that we need to look at of looking at funding and looking at the next step for housing, but also that coordination. They were able to hire someone 4 hours a day to do cleaning out or getting people out of the pods, policing it a little bit more, and assigning the pods. So it has been a little bit more hands-on, and Reflections is looking at continuing that on, because honestly, it has saved me a lot of gray hair and a lot of stress. That they're taking care of it. Reflections is taking care of it completely with that added staff instead of us volunteers doing it.
Thank you.
Marcia's also working, and Reflections has as an update to, although I think Councillor Byer and yourself and the mayor know about this, but they have secured funding under that to do a survey or a homeless survey through RDN to be able to look this spring over the next 3 months as to how many, what is the numbers that we're dealing with, what can be used as a base to looking at other grants in that transitional housing. So that's a big step, is getting that survey done and looking at what our needs are.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have any further questions, comments, concerns? I really like to thank your group for spearheading this. I know that there's been a lot of challenges, as Councillor Taylor has spoken about, but I do know that since security has been on site, a lot of the concerns from the public have been alleviated. And it's much quieter there. As somebody that drives by there late at night, it's good to see. And I'm happy to hear from the homelessness task force, from AHS and the hospital, that we're seeing a lot less people showing up with frozen toes, especially with the cold winter that we've had. And I believe Staff Sergeant Delisle, you mentioned last week in your report to council, you've also received or getting less calls for service in terms of dealing with the homeless population. Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct. It's part of the our initiative that we had to reduce the break-in enters. The pods did have an effect on the numbers of little break-ins that we had into sheds and garage and whatnot, helping to reduce the numbers of people that have to sleep in the rough. So it did have a positive impact, absolutely. Like mentioned a little earlier, do we need more pods? I can report that we still have the odd persons that are still seeking shelter, for example, like in hotel lobbies or at the bank, in the ATM lobbies. Now to just have pods, would that be a solution? Like it was mentioned earlier, probably not, but we're sure making steps in the right directions.
All right. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to the homelessness count, which I think will provide us really critical data as we look towards, continuing to lobby the provincial and federal governments for additional supports for transitional housing. Thank you very much for your presentation today, and thank you for your hard work.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on. Reports from staff, draft code of conduct bylaw number 2275, presented by Jason Assant, municipal intern, and Daniel Lucas, executive assistant and ledge coordinator.
Yes, thank you, and good evening to the committee. Mr. Assant will be booting up the presentation here shortly, and I'll just provide a very quick introduction. So as mentioned, we're presenting today a proposed draft bylaw 2275, which is a consolidation, repeal, and update of the existing code of conduct bylaw as amended. So just a quick overview of the presentation. We're going to start by providing a brief overview of kind of the process we followed in getting here and what the outcome is, namely bylaw 2275, and then go through in a little bit of detail some of the main changes that are being proposed. So our approach was twofold. We engaged the legal services to provide a full legal review of the existing code of conduct bylaw as amended, as well as completed an environmental scan and best practices assessment of 14 comparable municipalities. For this environmental scan, a battery of inclusion criteria were used, including the inclusion of our regional partners, similarities in population size, as well as getting some regional diversity. So looking across the province of Alberta to assess differences or not in the code of conducts. So the vast majority of the proposed changes are recommendations from legal counsel. And finally, the outcome here is draft bylaw number 2275 would consolidate and repeal the existing code of conduct whilst incorporating legal advice and a couple of the insights gleaned from the intermunicipal comparison. And from this meeting, we're really looking for the committee's kind of thoughts and feedback, not only on the changes made, but also just on the general principles included in the code of conduct and how they would like to proceed moving forward. With that, I'll turn things over to Mr. Assant, who took the lead on this project.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas, and thank you, Council, for listening to our presentation. So my purpose in discussing tonight will be essentially doing an overview of some of the additions and the updates to some of the clauses that were found in the previous bylaw, but I'll be going into a deeper dive of the breaches section of the bylaw, which faced a larger overhaul and changes compared to the previous one. And so the first area that we added to the new proposed bylaw is representing the municipality. This was a section that was found consistently throughout our sample, and as well that this will be an addition to expectations for councillors during their time in office that compared to section 153 of the MGA, where it just states the functions and duties of councillors. This new section will set expectations for behavior and participation of council members during their time in office. The next change that we made was respect for the decision-making process. Essentially, the main additions for this area was essentially explicitly preventing an individual councillor from binding the town to a particular contract or something like that. And then as well as just promoting increased transparency and discussion in council meetings for the public to see. And then on communicating on behalf of the municipality, as we changed the name of this section to ensure more generalizability and to be more succinct, rather than just calling a release of information to the public and media. And that the major change in this area or in this clause was that we allowed counselors, or per the legal advice that was given, is that it was found that in previous bylaw that it was too restrictive in the ability of one particular counselor to disagree with a motion and explain or state that they disagreed with such motion. And so now in the proposed wording that we are providing is that counselors can express why they did not support a particular motion, but does not preclude them from negating their duty to ensure council cohesion. And then our social media, we updated this section to expand on the area of accountability for counselors, rather than just simply referring to the town policy. And that also explicitly states that counselors are responsible for knowingly providing false information through social media as well, if that does occur. And then for discrimination, we aligned it more with the Alberta Human Rights Act, and that this will be consistent with other studied bylaws, and as well that per the legal counsel that was provided, some areas the council might have legitimate grounds to provide more or to discriminate based on certain areas which were not part of the Alberta Human Rights Act. And then for the use of municipal assets and services, this was a consistent area in many of the bylaws that we studied, and that essentially it prevents a councillor from misusing town property, and as well that any town property given to a councillor during their time in office is expected to be returned to the municipality once their time in office is over. However, there is an opportunity for any creation of policies that will permit deviations or permit different rules in regards to dealing with other town property. However, policy needs to be put in place for that. And then we removed the bribery section, is not because we are pro-bribery, but rather it is because that it is a superfluous section, because it is a Criminal Code of Canada matter, and that essentially that it is not necessary for our bylaw, because it will have to be directly related to the RCMP first if it is a bribery has occurred. And in discussing the breaches section, that the main change that occurred was removal of the CAO in the investigation process. Per the legal advice, it was found that furthermore, that per the MGA is that the CAO is the sole employee of council, and that it would create an awkward situation for a said employee to investigate their employer. And so Brownlee specifically recommended removing the CAO as the investigator. And that furthermore, and for best practices, is that it was found that only 1 out of the 14 municipalities provided the option of having the CAO as the investigator. And so the main changes was that we have the mayor or deputy mayor receiving complaints, and that this would be brought forward to council for their assessment of how to proceed on the matter. And another addition that we added, which was found in the town of Spruce Grove or city of Spruce Grove bylaw, was that there's a 60-day pre-election red zone, which essentially provides discretion for council and the mayor to not review any, or to suspend an investigation, or to not bring forward to council a complaint. This provides them discretion to avoid potential tumult during an election, and as well that it gives council the option of dropping an investigation or a complaint if one councillor is no longer on council, one councillor is no longer on council anymore. And that for addressing a complaint, the new bylaw or the updated bylaw would provide council the option to create their own committee, to retain a third-party investigator, or to drop a matter as a whole, or that if the allegations are not in dispute, that they can proceed forward from there. But essentially it provides council the discretion to deal with any complaint based on their severity and particular nuances that are found. And that for sanctions is that council has the option to go through a various list of different options, and as well it provides council discretion again based on the circumstances of the clause, as long as or of the complaint, as long as it does not preclude a councillor from fulfilling their duties per the MGA. And as well that another proposed change is that removing the supermajority vote of 5 to 7 for sanctions. It was proposed by Brownlee that having a simple majority would simplify voting on this matter. And I appreciate council listening to Daniel's and I's presentation, and I now open the floor to questions and comments from council.
And we'll just hand over to CO Beveridge who has some comments.
Mr. Mayor, and through to council, just wanted to note, just with regards to the red zone, there was an item that I wanted to make sure that it is addressed, that within 45 days of taking the oath of office, that said complaint could be dealt with. I just wanted to make a note of that essentially it just allows for, it doesn't just go away, but it allows for that time of the 60 days during the red zone, as we call it, for complaints to be put aside for that period of time. So council would have the new council of the day, and if that said councillor is no longer in office at that time, then the complaint would be nullified.
All right, thank you. Questions, comments? I like the changes. Councillor Pisici.
I quite enjoyed going through this and was a bit mind blown by the previous one. So I'm really happy that you're bringing this forward. The only one I'm curious about, and I thought maybe we should discuss, item 5.1. So there's a small change just to the wording. I'm assuming also that councillor applies to the mayor as well in this document, because everything in here refers to councillor, but there's not councillor and mayor. I'm not sure if we need to add the term mayor or if councillor applies. But the question I have on 5.1 was more of mandatory for each member of council to attend at least one orientation training session. So that implies that there would be more than one. There could be challenges with that. And then also, I'm even curious as to I maybe even more clarification on that. Like I know when after the last election, we had an orientation day. Not everybody could attend. So I'm just curious if that's more designed for those who've never sat on council before. Maybe we can word it to reflect that people who've never sat, or maybe have more clarification on that, just because I'm a bit confused. But and I went through this in great detail. And I really like the changes, and it makes a lot more sense to me now.
So Councillor Pisici, if I recall correctly, I believe it's actually a requirement from municipal affairs that everybody attends one. No, that's not correct. That's what I thought it was.
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Pisici, so it is that we offer, it's mandatory that municipalities offer the opportunity to have within 90 days of taking oath of office to have orientation.
How would you feel about just you member of council?
Well, like,
just offer it.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, this is year 14.
Yeah.
I don't need to take a lesson on chairing or going to a meeting or being the rules of order. It's just, I understand there could be new things, but to me, it's the mandatory part. You could hang a new counselor on it, or an old counselor on it for not going to it. To quote somebody from the past is, people should come to council already educated. We shouldn't pay to educate them. But
without knowing
you probably already figured that one out. Yeah. But it's I just the mandatory part. I think only in the whole document, that's the only thing that stood out to me. And not that I'm against the idea of it. It's I'd be more inclined to say newly elected or non-returning or highly recommended as opposed to mandatory. I don't know.
Well, from my perspective, I think it's absolutely we need to have at least one mandatory for anybody new coming in.
Yeah.
As for people with experience, as you said, we've had counselors here for 20 years. Doesn't really necessarily mean that they need to go to those things, right? So, and then sometimes you might have a counselor that's been here for 20 years still needs to go. You see horror stories across this province following elections where people get elected and they don't even understand what the position is, right? So I think it's really important for that to sort of happen. CEO Beveridge, do you have any comments?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, through to council. So I think from the perspective of the council orientation as a part of that relationship building as the team building, using that opportunity as well, that is something that I, of course, have high value, being able to, sit with the new council and have the opportunity to potentially share some of what the past or what the projects have been. So I would say that in the experience that we just went through in October, of course, there are those mandatory pieces that we are required as per the act now to provide to all of council members. But I think I would offer that there is the opportunity for the relationship building as well. So what I would like to do, and we will definitely take this back, is just to understand, I don't know if Jason or Daniel has this information handy, but just as far as the, from the sampling, just if they have that information, if it was a common occurrence for there to be mandatory, we could bring that back.
And maybe a little bit further to that, just because it's, for me, it's not very specific, like one orientation training session, either hosted in-house or by another municipally recognized organization. So what does that mean? That means that I don't want to come to Edson's, I'm gonna go to the counties. Like, I feel like it's, to me, it's.
Well, I think it's like AUMA has stuff, and then Brownlee has some stuff around election time too, so I think that's kind of.
You could see two councils doing joint orientations. Like we were invited by Yellowhead County to
George
Ruff's.
Jason or Daniel, any comments on that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Zahara. I believe at this time we don't have that information compiled, but we can certainly complete that environmental scan before bringing it back to council for first, second, and or third reading.
All right, thank you, Councillor Sharp.
Through that section 0.5 that Councillor Pisichny was talking about, I would believe too, it doesn't belong in code of conduct, but it does as a councillor, when you swear the oath, it's covered in your roles and responsibilities. I believe that would be in there when you go through your whole handbook of starting. So I believe it shouldn't be. The other one I was curious, and I can't find a code on it, where it says use of municipal assets and services. And it's just on one of the bulletin, no page number, council returns supplied electronic and that devices. So I'm saying we're going to discuss that. That may not belong in code of conduct, because if you're called in code of conduct, you're stripped of all your duties, but you remain as a council for 4 years. We need a policy on this, because in the past, our electronic devices became property of the outgoing council.
Yes,
so
the plan is to bring back the policy.
Okay, but where is it's on here? It says new, but I can't find it in the numbers.
No, as it says in the policy.
16.2 is the policy.
Yeah.
16.2.
As it says, policy can dictate otherwise, but in standard practice, yes.
Okay, 16.2, because that's what I was looking for, and I'm going, that doesn't belong in code of conduct, it belongs somewhere else, because it has come up in discussion. So I'm just questioning that part, why it's in there.
Go ahead, Councillor.
If you go through 16.2, it says electronic communication devices.
That's correct, yes.
So it's like a phone.
Right, I'm just trying to get clarification, because is this been, like the phones have been returned, the other ones. Okay, that was the one there, and I just got one more comment. I'm pleased with overall, because I agree the last one we erred in with that said, it was brand new. So we can't point fingers, we erred, it was brand new, it was thrown on us. The people of the day did the best they could. So I'm just pleased that I like the changes. There's a few bullets, but overall it's good.
All right, Councillor Pisichny.
This may be nitpicky, but and when you read sometimes it says refers to us as a member of council, and then sometimes it refers to us as a councillor, and it should be consistent throughout the policy. So it shouldn't say, as a member of council, that makes sense. And then here it says in their role as a councilor, because that defines only 6 of the 7. So it should say, I would think it should say that other than their role as a member of council, because that would just clean up the wording. Just in some points they call it a member of council, sometimes they call it a councillor, and the mayor is under this code of conduct as much as a councillor is. So unless the legal team has chosen those words,
Probably under definition, just council refers to council and the mayor.
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Pisichny, and to the rest of council. So under the definitions, the member means a member of council and includes a councillor or the mayor. So that can be clarified within the new with the bylaw when we bring it back, and just be consistent with the language.
Yeah, so under 2.3, under definitions, member means member of council and includes a councillor or the mayor.
Yeah, member, but
but not a count. Yeah, I see.
But in the actual bylaw, it says councilor.
Yeah.
That doesn't specify mayor. So like, if it says, if it would say as a member of council, that makes sense to me. That's anybody. And then in some places it just says councillor. So it's, to me, very specific to title.
One set of rules for council, another set of.
Well, that's what it's looking like, and just saying it, so, as a counselor.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention, yes.
Councilor, did I see your hand up? No, okay. Anybody else? Councilor Taylor.
Yeah, through to administration, again, I'll just reiterate what Councillor Position had said, that thank you for bringing this to us. When going through the bylaw or the policy, I should say, before, and seeing certainly the, how the CEO would be the investigator into the issues, that was troubling to see, and I'm glad we're correcting that now and following suit with other municipalities. This creates, obviously this always is great in principle, but I understand the complexities of enforcing this. And this is to council as well. It is a really tricky thing to follow through. So when calling code of conduct, it really does have to be something significant for us to follow through with, because or else I would hate to see pettiness come out of this. And I look at this group now, and I hopefully this won't happen over our term to see that, because this is great in the way it's written, but I would hate to see it, anyone, I'm not to say anyone would, but anyone abuse this. So thank you for your work, administration.
All right, thank you. Yeah, like I said, I really like this. I still think I wish that AUMA or the province would have somebody as a resource for rural municipalities to go to. Obviously, larger centers have integrity commissioners and that sort of thing. So it makes it really difficult to deal with these matters when you have nobody really hands off. And when you start involving lawyers, it becomes very expensive very quick, especially if it is something that may be frivolous, but you don't know at the surface if it is or it isn't. And my hope is that, and I think our group here is honorable and will conduct themselves in a way that these things should never have to be used. And disagreements happen from time to time and misunderstandings. And I would hope that with one-on-one discussions, those issues could be solved without having to go through any of this. So, Councillor Chenard.
Just to do a follow-up on that, yes, I believe what I'm hearing in the room, but in a lot of times, I like the way it's written now, because I agree sometimes there's misunderstandings. So now the way it's written now, whoever it's called on, they can have a conversation with the mayor and maybe they accuse things, and it's a better way of handling it. I'd hate to see that we need to get a third-party lawyer that gets expensive and complicated, because I think most of the time, small town, there's 7 of us in a room. I have to agree. Sometimes it's a total misunderstanding, but if people can get together, meet in the room, we can talk it out and figure it all out. So I like the way it is. If we went to extreme, then I think we went to like criminal charges and stuff involved, but most of the misunderstanding in small town could be handled in the appropriate manner. But since the mayor's got special powers, then we have the 3 of us now, and it's not really right. But thank you. I really like this, and I think we're going in the right direction.
All right, Councilor Byer, you're good. Don't want to forget about you on the screen. All right, awesome. Thank you. Administration, do you have what you need? Some general feedback there. All right. Vacation pilot program update presented by Colin McComb.
Good evening, Council.
Good evening, Colin.
I am, sorry, 1 second here. I have been asked to come here and present on the vacation pilot, and I'm just getting it up on the screen. Oh, where'd it go? There we go. Okay. Perfect. So the vacation pilot program, as you're aware, it was approved in November of 2020. All employees under this program receive 30 use it or lose it vacation days per year, plus 5 community investment days that one of our councillors referenced earlier tonight. The object of this program was essentially to increase our compensation without increasing the cost to taxpayers. We hope this would allow us to attract more and higher quality candidates in the long term and increase productivity by compelling us to become more intentional and aware about how we go about things. This program also eliminated a $274,000 plus or minus vacation liability. The implementation of this program has coincided with some significant organizational challenges that are unrelated to the program itself. The COVID pandemic for us has meant mandatory work from home for many of our employees for most of the year. No personal incentive to take vacation in the winter months, which has complicated things, and I'll get to that later, as well as changing market conditions in the market overall. I don't know if you've heard of the Great Resignation yet or not, but I imagine you soon will, if not. This has also happened during a period of organizational flux as we transitioned CAOs. The prior CAO left in December of 2020, and we didn't receive a new CAO until June 1st. So these are things to keep in mind just as we go through these statistics. We did say as a part of this that we would track certain metrics. We did, and we're presenting them here for your information. The purpose of these metrics is to answer two questions. Number one, has attraction and retention improved? And number two, how we become more productive or efficient as a result of this program overall. Question one, we seek to answer on this slide, and it's really difficult for us to answer that question. We track two metrics here. One is voluntary turnover rate, so those who have chosen to leave the organization, and we tracked vacancy rate as well. Turnover dropped in 2021, but that's just a one-year drop, and I'm not sure how significant that is in terms of the vacation pilot or not. I think it's a little early to make that determination. As well, salaried vacancy rates did go up, but that didn't have much to do with the program. That had more to do with organizational dynamics. Vacancy rates, just for those unfamiliar with the term, most people know what turnover is, but vacancy rate is basically reflects how long positions in the organization have been open without us being able to fill those positions. Now, this vacancy rate includes the CAO position, which was vacant for 5 months, which is very normal for a position, for that position in the organization. But in addition to that being vacant, we also deliberately left general manager position open until the new CAO arrived, so she could be the one to fill that. So that right there accounts for about 6% vacancy rate, just as long as those two positions were open. So those numbers not terribly telling. On the second question, have we become more efficient as an organization? We tracked vacation usage, sick time usage, as well as employee engagement. On vacation, you can see that we've tracked on this slide 2 years prior to the pilot. As you can see, it's very normal for us to have ebbs and flows at certain times of the year. It's probably not much of a surprise to you to see that vacation tends to go up in July and August, and as well during the Christmas season. I think it's important to note that what we are tracking here isn't total utilization of vacation, but we're looking at how evenly we've spread vacation over the year. Generally, with a better even distribution and spread, that means we're able to maintain better stability in service levels. Not entirely useful under the old program to track utilization, because whatever wasn't utilized would be either paid out or carried over to the next year. So previous vacation usage would have been 100% all the time, whereas that's not the case under the new program, where we have a use it or lose it system where you don't have to use all the vacation hours available to you. And I do have those numbers available if you like. But back to the subject at hand, the distribution. This is 2021. And you can see that this normal dynamic of having people take vacation in July and August, and as well as December, it went from becoming kind of a trend to becoming a problem. Now, I don't think this has anything to do with the vacation pilot, although having more vacation hours available to people in general certainly may have exacerbated that problem. Why did it happen? It happened because this happened during the second and third waves of the COVID pandemic. And if you recall that time, we weren't supposed to leave our immediate vicinity. We weren't supposed to leave the municipality, let alone leave the province or the country. So what happened is there was almost zero incentive for people to take vacation in the winter months, and people just didn't. It also happened because we weren't proactive as enough, to be frank, as a senior leadership team in making sure that people took their vacation during those months anyway. This led to less than optimal office presence during the summer months, and not as even a distribution as we would normally like to see. Sick time is another outlier. We would normally experience fluctuations in sick time dependent on any number of factors. Again, if one employee in the salaried group equals about 3%, if that one employee goes off for long-term disability, that can throw these other numbers, up. If you look at 2021, we experienced a considerable surge in sick time. Again, keeping in mind that one employee equals about 3% of our workforce. This, in my opinion, has very little to do with the vacation pilot program. This has to do with COVID. While the program actually may have mitigated the worst impacts of COVID and helped contribute to better mental health, the better mental health and physical health of our people, it was never going to eliminate these things. COVID was an unmitigated disaster for people's mental and physical health. And in 2021, that was the year when it truly hit home. In 2020, we still had hope. And in 2021, I think a lot of us felt that hope was starting to be taken away, and we started to see our sick time numbers radically increased as a result. Moving on, salaried engagement. So in terms of employee engagement, this is difficult to measure because we didn't conduct a survey in 2020 when the sky was falling for a number of reasons. And because the survey has been changed considerably. We used to have an employee opinion survey, which was more about getting people's feelings about measuring people's feelings about the organization, their opinions about the organization, but that's not really what we want to track. We want to track people's engagement. And engagement measures people's voluntary effort or employees' voluntary effort that they will generally put forward to make the organization better. So we're trying to determine how engaged are our people. So it's hard to compare that to previous years because the surveys don't really align. But all in all, these aren't bad numbers. Many organizations that I've seen and worked for and worked with in the past would kill for an overall engagement rate of 86%, particularly in the midst of a COVID pandemic. So what these numbers tell me is that even though COVID was absolutely hitting people's mental health and their physical health and quality of life, and people may not have been happy, it didn't necessarily impact their engagement in the organization or the amount of voluntary effort they were willing to put out. When we do talk about how people are feeling, though, if you look at, if we did ask one question that's more of how happy are you in this organization, or happy are you with this organization, and these numbers, again, could be better, but not bad. 85% of our salaried employees felt that if they had to do it all over again, they would work for the town again. So conclusions that we draw looking at the data, unfortunately, doesn't tell us a great deal about the success of the program. I think what it tells us more about are the challenges that COVID has presented during the last couple of years. We've experienced all number of disruptions, some of which we've managed well, some of which we could manage better. Our mandate in this process was to find ways to punch above our weight in terms of compensation without increasing taxes. We know we accomplished that, but we knew that at the outset. What we don't know is how well this is going to accomplish our other objectives as proved out by the data. And that's really difficult data to sort out given the year that we have. And so all of this factors into administration's recommendations. And basically this is what it looks like. We're firming up our procedures in 2022. I think we need to be more diligent in ensuring that there's a more even distribution of vacation in the year. We need to be more diligent about cooperating between departments to make sure that service levels not only don't suffer, but that they improve through this pilot. And I think we can do that. I think we're well positioned to do that as long as we make a few tweaks, a few changes to the procedure, which we are doing. And then if all goes well, and if we're able to improve that, then later this year, administration may recommend that we renew the pilot for another year so we can have more time to observe the success of this organization. However, at that point in time, it is unlikely that we will be recommending that we make this a permanent fixture. We're not there yet. I'll finalize by saying if council does decide to end the program, there are alternatives that we can discuss and provide in more robust detail. Right now, just very briefly, we could return to the former system in 2023, which would involve refunding our liability account. We could return to something like the former system, but with more of an earn and burn system where you earn as you go, which may negate the ability to refund may negate our need to refund the liability account, or coming up with more of a hybrid system. We're continuing to scan the environment and review these alternatives. But for now, we still believe it's possible to manage this program effectively, and we intend to prove that out this year. And so ends my presentation. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Colin, for your presentation. And we do have a new face around this table, CO Beverage, who joined our organization. What is it, 6, 7, 8 months now? So I'm going to put you on the spot here, as maybe it's not necessarily important, but I'm going to do it anyway. Was the vacation program something that inspired you to come here from your perspective, and how has recruitment been, and that this would be for Colin as well, since the pilot was introduced? I know that was a big concern for us. Obviously, COVID has also played an impact on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when it comes to, I suppose, my position, it wasn't something that I most likely looked at. It's something in my position that would have been a negotiated part of the negotiation package. But I can definitely see how other areas it would be advantageous for other employees to seek that out. Yeah, that's.
So on the recruitment side?
On the recruitment side, most likely it does. We haven't had a lot of recruitments to at this time. So during the recruitment for our general managers, again, was that a factor? I've asked that question, and from the senior management side, it isn't from that high of a level, but it might be for the lower levels of employees, just based on experience level as well. So looking at individuals that had long-term and experience with municipalities, etc. It's a matter of providing the full package to those individuals.
Thank you. All right, council, questions, comments? Councillor Byer, since you're online, I'll ask you first.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair to Mr. McComb, thank you for the presentation. I realize there's been some huge challenges over the past year with vacations and being open for summer, and then everybody wants to take their vacation then. Question, which CO Beveridge kind of maybe started going towards it, maybe didn't finish, or maybe she wasn't in the right position to be answering it. This was something that in lieu of offering a bigger financial compensation package that council at the time was looking at an alternative method to that financial obligation. So my question is this sufficient enough for the positions that we have open that it's a big enough of a lure, or is it only maybe a lure for the younger generation where they wouldn't necessarily have this much vacation time that would already be naturally coming to them given their time in, other organizations? If you're coming from another organization with 20 years, maybe you would already be building that in with your vacation. So I'm just wondering, is this an effective method to get new employees to Edson as it stands?
Sam Everidge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through Councillor Byer. We've had that debate at the senior leadership table a few times with regards to, I think when it comes to, it depends on the employee. It absolutely does. It depends on the values that they have. And what we're seeing is that things are changing. Mr. McComb mentioned, the great resignation and the impacts of COVID. Things are definitely evolving, and it's something where when we've discussed this, we've definitely we have not come to an agreement, I would say, as a whole. We need more time to evaluate, because there are some factors that are not, it's not just about when you think about really what we're trying to achieve here, it's when we provide these type of opportunities, it's again, when we talk about the whole package, when we create a good culture, people want to come work with us. So that's an area that we're looking at. So when we have all, the whole package of competitive compensation, perks and benefits like something like this, and as well, there's other things that we're exploring that are such as a hybrid work environment, etc. So I think that we've had many discussions about this. This has been something that has been a lively debate with our group. So I don't know if that answers your question fully, but I hope to have provided enough information.
You good, Councillor Byer? All right, Councillor Sharp.
Through the chair to Colin, this has been going on for a year. I was against it. I'm still against it, but I agree with you. COVID has played a horrible part. There's no way of judging this correctly with COVID. The one comment where we're, and I guess it'd be to each management team, when you're encouraging employees to take holidays, spread them out, because there's prime June and July, when school's out, July and August. So I guess we leave it to each team, because the way I personally do it at work is first come, first serve. There's a calendar up, you got X amount of employees. If you want prime time, take it. And would we have the power to tell them that you can't send away 100% of your workforce? Is there a number to say 20% can be gone, or 10, meaning in July and August? Because the last thing we want is one department is very busy in July and August, and 75% of the guys are on holidays for now up to 30 days. That would paralyze the town.
Through the chair to Councillor Chouinard, I think one of the big problems that we had is last year we had one GM position vacant. We were in a transition period. It is the role of our GMs to make sure that we have adequate coverage across the board, and I'm confident that that's going to happen. It's always a question of how prescriptive do you want to be in your policies. And you have to be careful, because if you're too prescriptive, you might actually hinder productivity rather than helping it. Summer is not the best time for some departments to be off, but it's a perfect time for other departments to be off. Much of public works, for example, where the snow is not flying and the pressure isn't quite as bad. So it really depends, which is why it needs to be managed effectively by the general managers. But we do have stronger processes in place now for requesting that vacation, reviewing that vacation, and making sure we're intentional. I myself talked to my staff and said, look, we need X number of days booked and in the system and taken before we ever get to summer, and we're complying with that.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Piasecki?
I just have a couple of questions in regards to this. So if I understand this current policy, a new employee, so an out of scope employees only, does not apply to union, right? They start with 30 paid days, plus they get 5 paid community days, so that's 35 days. So did they get personal days and sick days as well?
Yes, they don't have personal days, but they do have sick days available to them. Those things are not considered to overlap or have much to do with each other. It's worth noting that salaried employees do not have short-term disability available to them, so those paid sick days are an important element of our compensation policy right now.
And is there a set amount
for sick days?
Yeah.
The sick days, it accumulates a certain amount of days per month. I don't quite remember when the cap is. I think it might cap at 60 days, but I would have to double check that.
60 or 6?
60, but remembering that covers for short-term disability. That is not utilized. That is not utilized unless it's necessary and it's not paid out.
So what would the standard be? Just regular sick days?
I'm not prepared to standard be, you mean with other municipalities?
Like
our policy here.
What's our policy? Somebody can't be taking 60 days, just take 60 days sick days.
No, you can't. No. There are policies. There are processes for going through sick time, and if you're away for a certain amount of days, there's doctor's notes. There's a whole process that you need to get through. And once they're gone, they're gone.
And so our benefits plan does not have short-term disabilities.
That's correct. That's why we have the number of sick days that we have. Because if somebody were to get sick, they would have nothing to cover them until long-term disability kicks in. And I don't have the statistics in front of me, but sick time usage is nowhere near full utilization.
Hope not.
So just further to that, would it be beneficial for us to have short-term disability available for those employees? Or is that just cost prohibitive?
I'm not sure that's something I'm prepared to venture an opinion about because I did not come prepared for that discussion.
Oh, that's fair enough. I would suggest that should be a discussion because that's concerning to me, those numbers. Councillor Sharp.
I'll be persistent, right? And I can seem intelligent. Through to that, so if I'm hearing this right, for salaried employees, we don't have short-term disability benefits?
That is correct. It is self-insured through sick days that are available. So we do have short-term disability in the sense that if you don't use your sick days and if you don't abuse or overuse them, they will cover a considerable portion of that period, but we don't have sick days through an external insurance provider.
Just so I can follow it clearly, but if you're a salaried employee, you're allowed up to 6 days. I mean, granted, I can't just say I'm sick. I need to back up. So the first 60 days, your salary would be paid to you as regularly for 60 days, and then you go to long-term?
Yeah, I would have to go back and check the actual number. I'm sorry, I didn't bring that number in front of me.
Councilor Pisichny?
What was the policy for out of scope staff before this pilot? So what were the vacations given to staff at that time?
Yeah, it was like a lot of other vacation policies. It's you hit a certain threshold, you hit a certain number of years, you jump from 4 weeks per year to 5 weeks per year. It follows the exact same that's available to it followed the exact same that was available to union employees. The only difference is an extra week was offered in lieu of overtime.
So if you're okay, so followed more closely in line with our collective agreement with the union. And then, so what would you start off? Like, I understand years of service changes, but if you were a brand new employee with the town of Edson with the previous policy, what would you receive for vacation time?
Under the previous policy, if we hired you, we would front load you with 2 weeks when you started, because you would earn your vacation in 1 year, and then the idea was you were supposed to use it in the following year.
So none the first year.
No, to clarify, you would be front loaded with 2 weeks in the first year for that use for your use in the first year.
And just to further provide information, the reason the pilot was brought into place is our comparators for out of scope and management was not in line in terms of comparable municipalities where our collective agreement was far more in line with that. So it was a way to try to increase compensation without actually increasing the amount we're spending.
That is correct. Our wage survey confirmed for us that we were at the 42nd percentile, or 42.7 percentile as a comparator for wages.
All right, Councillor Taylor.
Just one question and then a comment. And I looked at the presentation, I didn't see it, but how many employees would this policy refer to within our organization?
That would apply to our salaried employees, so about 35.
About 35.
35?
Yeah.
You're paying out of scope. Lots of out of scope.
And we have approximately 100 staff within the town, correct?
It ebbs and flows, correct, but yes, around 100 altogether.
So just looking back at talking about vacation, there doesn't seem to be enough concrete data to understand whether the program has been successful, because COVID has thrown this for an entire loop. I know obviously administration is going to discuss this. I'd be in favor of trying it out or extending the pilot for another year to, when you have that discussion, if administration thinks that's appropriate, to see if we see any gains from it. Because, I mean, I look at the stats you provide, and it's, I look at where the waves were and things like that, and how that would have thrown things out of whack, and whether or not people could travel or even taking holidays, but still it was in the middle of a pandemic, and we, the town needed the staff to still be on call, as it were. I think another year, perhaps getting away from the pandemic, we might see some more concrete results. So I look forward to hearing about it as to what senior administration decides to bring back.
All right, Councillor Pisichny.
I'm kind of on the opposite end of that scale. I'm a bit challenged by this policy. Technically, it's 35 days times, did you say 35 employees? It's 1,000 days. That's 3 full-time positions to cover those days if you divide it by the year. So, or 2.8 days. I think there's better policies out there than that. I just struggle. That's 6 weeks vacation. So you're brand new on a job. You haven't even got to know people, you're taking a week off. And then not 1 week, you're taking 6 of those weeks off in your first year. I can speak. I'm in an out of scope position myself personally, and I struggle to use my first 2 weeks up in my job because I was so learning my job and so in my new position, and 6 weeks, I would have never got through 6 weeks. So I just would have lost them anyway. And then you put in a position where people who've been here for 1 or 2 years or 3 years are getting the same kind of vacations as somebody who's put in 25 or 30 years. To me, it's a bit of a challenge. You know, if we are, maybe our other policy on the salary side of things is tying our CAO's hands. I just find this, like, it's actually technically almost 7 weeks if you add the 5 community investment days in it. So that's you're not gonna have staff. You're gonna have to hire a position to cover days when they're not here. So I don't, it's a bit challenging. I mean, if I guess that the question is it comes down to is it a game changer for people coming, right? At the end of the day, 6 weeks of vacation is not great if you're not getting paid to your position. You're just not going to come for the vacation. And are you attracting the right employees if they're coming here because they get 6 weeks of vacation instead of getting a good salary? Because really, what are we trying to attract? So I'll just be honest. I don't like this policy at all, and I don't like this pilot project. So I would be against it. So I would like to see something different.
So to Councillor Pasicny's point, the original plan was 8 weeks.
Oh.
Yeah. So somebody around this table, not naming names, pushed for a little bit less than that. But this is the challenge that we face, and that this is why I asked the question about recruitment. Because if it's not being effective in recruiting people or keeping people, then we shouldn't be doing this. And once again, it depends on the person. For somebody like myself, I would prefer more vacation. I'm more concerned about having more time with my family and doing things. But that's not the same for everybody. Everybody's in a different space, depending on where they are in their lives. The other angle to this, if we don't have this, then we're going to have to start increasing our scope and management salaries. There wasn't an appetite to do it at that time. Obviously, we are under very tight financial pressures. $240,000 or $242,000 liability there. So we do have a new senior leadership team here that may have some different ideas. We are recruiting for a position right now that's out of scope that we're not getting, my understanding, a flurry of activity. So I think we need to take all that into consideration. But to do the status quo, being in the 42nd percentile with a standard vacation policy, that's not going to get us anywhere. So we have to either continue on this path or start addressing the comparables, because people are fluid now. They will move in an instant to make extra money. And unfortunately, right around us, we have municipalities with much deeper pockets that pay much better than us. And we also want to retain our employees too and make sure that they're happy. So Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Sharp.
Just a point to say, I'm not saying I'm in favor of the policy or not. I'm just saying there's not enough stats to say if it's working. If it's proving to what Mayor Zahara was saying, in terms of, is it working to recruit? Is it working for employee satisfaction? I think COVID has played too much of a part in deciding whether we have enough data. So maybe another year, and another year costs us nothing. And what Mayor Zahara said, if we don't do this program, means we have to do something else, something that we'll have to go back to the budget for. So I'm not saying I'm in favor of it. I'm just saying this costs us nothing to get some concrete data to know whether or not it's working. Again, looking forward to hearing what administration wishes to improve that. So,
Councillor Schnarr.
So through to Colin, if you're asking us if we're in favor of it, I think I wasn't in favor of it now, and I'm still not in favor of it. And what I'm hearing in the room right now, we haven't had a problem. So if you're asking for my answer, I'm still not in favor, maybe bring it back and we can kill it and move on. So if that's what you're asking, that's what I'm saying. Bring it to council, we'll vote on it again. Maybe it's time to get rid of it. And here's suggestions with our new town manager. Recruitment, I believe a lot of times is the interest, because she stated to us why she came here. And I believe most people come here not looking for vacations, what's important, how much am I going to get paid, and where am I moving to? Edson has proven to be a great place. We've never been like some communities, like I'm not going to name any names, if someone very close to us can't get a town manager. Edson's never had that problem. And filling our higher management positions, we've always been very successful in getting good people. So I think we need to kill it because it's not fair to people that have been here a long time, and let our team hire the right people and use their way of hiring to entice people to come, because so far it's proven she's done an excellent job.
So for a rare occasion, I will agree with Councillor Sherrard.
I'm not gonna hear about lightning.
People will come for pay, so we gotta be prepared to pay. We have not been willing to do that, and we have fallen way behind, and it's really hard to catch up when you fall behind in a competitive environment. Go ahead, Colin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just felt I do have some other data in front of me that I think it's useful for council to know, because when we talk about the 6 or 7 weeks, I mentioned during the presentation that utilization is different under this plan because you don't actually have to use it. The community investment days, out of all the 35 or so eligible employees that we've had in the past year, we only used 55 hours of that. So that was definitely not utilized. And of our regular vacation days, the employees altogether used 88% of that. So that amounts to about 26 days that each staff member used. So just so council is aware, that's this employees, that this was always meant to be enough that people could use it if they didn't. It was more or less about what people earn and more about what they need, and to take as much as you need. And clearly most employees in the organization were happy leaving 3 or 4 days on the table.
All right, anything new to add? Administration, you get what you need? Colin, are you there?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Our plan was to improve the processes and come back later in the year with more concrete recommendations. If council is happy to do that, we can do that. If what you're saying is no, you want us to bring this back sooner so you can make a decision now, please advise.
You want them to bring it back sooner, or do you want to wait for more data?
Like how long is the wait period? Like what do we? Like
Steel beverage?
Long wait.
Ms. Mayor, through to council. So if we were to continue with the program for the bulk of 2022, that would allow us to bring back the same kind of data, but more data, hopefully, post-COVID. And that's in the world that we live in as of today.
As of midnight.
As of midnight. Also, one of the things in your package, there was the procedure, and the procedure did lay out the requirements for staff to adhere to. Those were not in place before. The requirement to submit your vacation and for the peak times was not a part of the process. And to be fair, it was a state of transition. It was probably the worst time to do this pilot. So when I guess from my perspective, if we want to make a decision based on data and based on information, so one, we can gather as we recruit, because we are recruiting for some positions, key positions, throughout this next little while. We are also going to be requiring submitting a staff engagement survey again, which will survey our staff so it talks about, we can include that as far as a retention piece, and get some information from our current employees on how they feel about it as well. Further, it is having the opportunity to review this program and with a full year that is closer to normal than the COVID, like for the 2021 year, would be of benefit, I suppose. But also understanding that, you know, we haven't had the opportunity to think of other options at this moment as far as attraction. So what I heard this council just provide us was that previously, when this was put in place, we were at the 42nd percentile and there wasn't any appetite to increase wages. So if it is the appetite of council to increase those wages, I mean, obviously there's budget impacts that we are under, that we would have to consider. So there's those few factors that I guess I would just question, and maybe that we would have to understand what that would look like. So that was this was brought in at a different time, pre-COVID, right? And November 2019, I believe, as far as an approach to attracting staff. And then we had a pandemic.
Yeah. So my recommendation was bring something back in the fall after you have more time to kind of figure things out, and then we can make a decision at that time, as we'll be entering our budget discussions at that time too. So kind of would work hand in hand. Councillor Schnarr.
Where I'm a little confused, who are we surveying? Are we surveying the new employees we're hiring, or we're surveying the other ones? Because the old employees are already here, they don't get 6 weeks. So who are we surveying during COVID?
Both.
That everyone gets
My
it?
recommendation would be for both. So when we're doing recruitment, do you have those to inquire? Was it an attraction? Was it something that you encourage you to join us or to?
Well, no, the only thing we're looking for clarification is because like this is the attraction. And I should know it, but what about the employees that are here now in those 35 employees during the trial? They get 6 weeks as well? There's some clarification on that.
Yeah.
So they're all getting it.
Correct.
So we need to survey our people working now, not the new people coming.
Both. I would suggest both. I would suggest the new as well as the current employees as well, as far as how's it working.
Okay, because the only thing I spoke against then, you give it and take it away. So you've been here 5 years of saying, hey, we're giving you 6 weeks. Oh, the program didn't work. Sorry, I'm only joking. Take it away. That was a problem I had when we first bring it in. You give it and now you got to take it away. And that's where I'm thinking, I think we need to review this, rethink this and kill it now is my thought.
Yes, you made your point, Councillor Schnarr. So
Okay.
thank you. You good, administration? All right, we're gonna move on. Infrastructure and planning. Fees, rates, and charges updates presented by Ms. Bittner and Mr. Kitlitz. Is he joining us online or? She is.
Oh, there it is.
Okay, thank you, Council. Along with my colleague, Mr. Kitlitz, we're presenting an update on the fees and rates. So if you remember, back in November 25, on 25th of November, we passed the 2020 budget as an interim budget. And one of those reasons was to give us some time to look at our fees and bring those back to council. So going through looking at these fees, it has been proven difficult given to the lack of a formal sort of policy for us to look at a strategy and direction for these fee reviews. So policy like that we'd be able to do more robust and strategic approach and consistent approaches to this fee review as well as ones into the future. We have recently moved towards some cost recovery with our utility-based services like water and sewer and garbage, etc. These were done more on after a discussion basis rather than on an actual sort of formal policy that drove that. Now, having said that, there are some fees that we have identified that are considerably below market rates, and we still plan to bring some forward for the final budget. Let's have a quick presentation. Go through here. Okay. Steve, can you help me? Button, I can't find it. When this is do the slideshow. Oh, thank you very much. So with the after discussions about establishing a policy framework for our fees and charges updates, there are a few items that when we do this, we would like some feedback from council. Not necessarily asking for all the answers tonight, but just to give you an idea on some of the areas that we would require some feedback from council. So one we looked at was like, who should we actually compare our fees to? We have our usual four, the Whitecourt, Hinton, Drayton, Rocky municipalities that we always use. So we have some criteria to consider when we're looking at our comparables. Maybe a similar population and geography, which are our usual four fall into that category. Maybe even the number of full-time equivalents, number of staff members these municipalities have, their annual budget amounts, and a regional context for the services we're looking at. So some recommended additions that we could have for some of our fees for comparisons could be the county, maybe Barhead or even Stony Plain, depending on some of those. So there will be things to take into consideration when we're looking at our comparables. It'd be good to have this sort of set down more formally, because then we would know we're always looking consistently at the same municipalities. So going forward, we'd have that consistent comparison, the apples to apples thing, right? With that going forward. Another area is the actual fee model that we would need to narrow down for some of our fees. So there's four sort of basic fee models. You have your no fees, where we just do everything through taxation. There's one that's low fees. So we have some fees, but it's still largely serviced through taxation. A competitive fee model, where a large portion of the services can be covered by the fees, decreasing that reliance on taxation. Or you can go all the way out to 100% cost recovery fee model. We can also consider models based on our comparative municipalities, looking at a percentile or that sort of approach as well. However, we may need to consider different models depending on the service provider, because one size can't fit all. For example, if we decide to go cost recovery, that works for water rates, but may not be the best to go for a public swim admission charge. So moving forward, when we're bringing the policy forward, may need to look at those different models depending on the area that we're looking at for the services. Another thing to consider would be the frequency of the review and the updates, whether it's every year or every 2 years. Based on some of the research that we've done, we've seen 2 years to be a typical frequency. So if we were to go every year, we may find that we're not actually getting a big change with our comparisons because the others aren't doing it that often. So sort of more leaning towards the 2 years on that one. Obviously, it's not written in stone. Periodically, we may need to change these as policies change or bylaws change, and they can always be brought forward at any time throughout the year or throughout any of that 2 year period. Other considerations within the policy would be in some cases, our fee increases would require some level of notice and or engagement. Like, for example, our community groups who create their own budgets based on our fees. There would need to be some engagement with them, and definitely a notice period for those. And then also just what is a reasonable time frame for notification on the fees? Is it 1 month notification, 3 months, or do we have something that says we always come into effect January 1st? So these few things that we're looking at for the policy that we can start working on and bring forward at a future meeting. Just wanting to get councils to start thinking about these for the feedback as we bring this forward. But those are the main considerations we saw when we start bringing forward a policy. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we did come across some areas that we can bring back for this final budget that's coming up. So we're recommending increases for some select planning and development fees, We have the land use bylaw rewrite coming up, so there is some select ones we could do there. Looking at the tipping fees for the landfill, the business licensing, variety of fees at the airport for landing, terminal, power pedestal and parking. And also the cemetery, which I know was presented to council in January, so that's one we've already started some work on there. So with those in mind, those are the ones we're recommending for increases when we bring our final budget forward. So it's a little bit of a hybrid. We've brought some forward for this final budget, but also looking at building a policy for a more robust and consistent approach and strategic approach to our fees reviews for the next budget and also going into the future.
All right, thank you, Ms. Bittner, for your presentation. Council, questions? Councilor Moore.
Through the chair to Ms. Bittner, for the uninitiated, what is a power pedestal?
Through the chair to Councillor Moore. I would have to ask Mr. Kitlitz because I have no idea.
To charge the plane. Go ahead, yeah. Mr. Kitlitz.
Yeah, it's through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think it's just a power pedestal to plug in the planes that are parked at the airport.
Okay.
So there's a charge for using those pedestals.
And we all know what the power costs are nowadays. Councilor Sharp.
I like your idea of doing it January 1st because our fees are transitioning from an example when we put in the recycling fee and stuff. So if we give a January 1st calendar year, we can let the public know that we are changing it over, and then January 1st would be the best time to do it. So always expect the increase January 1st.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilor Barn.
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Bittner and Mr. Kitlitz. So on your fee model, you have the no fees, the low fees, competitive, and cost recovery. Where would you estimate that our services that we're offering or programs fall in line right now?
That's a loaded question. Go ahead, Ms. Bittner.
I think we don't have the no fees. I think it depends on the service. Like we mentioned that we might have to do a hybrid model on the different services. We have some cost recovery. We have some of the competitive, and we may also have some low ones once we get into the full investigation with those. I think more the competitive to cost recovery, but as I say, with that caveat that we haven't really dived into all of our fees at this time. I don't know if Clayton has anything to add to that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sarah. So through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's a lot of the comparisons, like for planning, landfill, and the business license in the airport. We went and done the research. Planning and development, a lot of them were pretty close. Some of them were quite a bit lower. It varies, right? And that's why it's so challenging for us to come back with something without some sort of policy direction from council, because we could make some assumptions all over the map where we could go with these updates. And quite frankly, I've done a lot of fees updates in my career, and where there's not policy direction, we make some assumptions, and sometimes those council meetings are a little bit uncomfortable because we've made some poor assumptions. So it really helps to have that sort of policy direction from council. So I guess to answer it, we're probably on the low side, I think, in a lot of areas, but some were more comparable. The landfill were quite a bit lower, and I think council's aware of that. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
All right, thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Through to administration, thank you for bringing this to us. One of the things that I talked about, that I think we all talked about at the budget, was finding more revenue, even nickel and diamond some way to find more revenue, and this is it. So do you have, and this is a bigger question, and do you have a list of things that the town charges fees for, like a detailed list in terms of things? Wasn't in the presentation, but can we have that list in terms of what we're sort of looking at?
Fees and rates by law.
Fees and rates by law.
Yeah, so that'll give you a complete review of all the fees that we charge.
We'll be happy to provide that to you.
Okay. Well, go ahead. So within your report, you asked for sort of three things in terms of models that we're looking at. The first thing with the model, I think it depends upon the service for the type that it is, right? And that's the tricky thing in terms of what our philosophy is. For me, it just depends on what it is. Some of it is, if it's an individual use, it's a cost recovery. If it's more for a sort of a collective use, then it's, you know, whether a hybrid method is to look at. So you're asking about if you think the list of municipalities that you'd like to add to the comparison is fair. Yeah, I like those. And I think every 2 years to review these is appropriate. Going back to talking about the cemetery, when it hadn't been reviewed in 20 years, that's not good. And I'd like to review it every 2 years. Whether that's built into a policy, whether that's in the bylaw, but that wouldn't be built into the bylaw, would it?
A review.
A review?
We could build that into the bylaw.
I mean, if there's a bylaw of fees,
Yeah.
if there's nothing in there that says when we have to review them.
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Taylor, it is very common practice to have a review of bylaw or a statement within your bylaw to have it reviewed. And that is something that I haven't actually seen very much of in this organization. It's something that we're working towards as far as having a review on our policies, and that's within the policy as well as for our bylaws. It just keeps it current.
Yes, thank you. Yep. Okay. So looking at that, I think every 2 years is appropriate. So.
Thank you.
So for me, I know that like on the community services side with Repsol, for example, when we had the community services board, fees were set and there was actually increases for a 5-year period at X amount, whether it be 10 cents or 15 cents. And that way you're not falling too far behind until that next review happens. So I think something of that nature where it's automatic, it goes up a little bit, kind of like our water and sewer rates. So we're not having those big jumps. You know, 25 cents is easier to swallow than a $4 increase 4 years down the road or something of that nature. I think being competitive in most areas is good, but I think also depends on the service that we're providing. If it's something that's targeted for lower income people or community as a whole, as was indicated, I think lower fees would be, you don't want to chase people away on some of these services that we're providing. And then some, we need to get cost recovery. You know, I look at the landfill as a perfect example of that, where we need to be recovering more of our cost. We also have to be considerate, and I think this is a mistake that we made before when we increased the rates of the landfills. We have a big user, warehouser, that was adversely impacted in the middle of their budget. So giving that appropriate notice, and also ensuring that the services we're providing it to town of Edson residents and the surrounding Elliott County, and not attracting things from outside our municipality that we may not want, for example, at the landfill. So I know it's kind of wishy-washy, but you know, when it comes to overall, I think we really need to be looking at competitive and trying to lessen the burden on taxpayers and making sure that those that are benefiting for those services are contributing a bit more to those services. You know, we're very, very challenged financially as a municipality our size. Go ahead, Councillor Byron.
Thanks through the chair to council and administration. I think it really did, from my perspective, it depends on what these services are. Like the mayor and a few others mentioned, the landfill should be cost recovery. I would find it helpful to see a list of what we're charging and where we're at cost recovery, or if we are, I know I did see some numbers at one point, that the pool is less cost recovery than the arenas, and kind of just understanding those dynamics. And the soccer fields are different from the baseball diamonds, and trying to maybe get people or these groups on a little bit more of an even playing field, if that makes sense. There are nonprofits in the community that offer cost recovery models for their sports, and they still seem to attract people. So I find that really interesting. And I think it really is an unsustainable expectation to think that the town can continue to subsidize all the activities and services that we offer at the rates that they are. I really think that we have to look at all these and I think we need to have some increases, but we need to talk to those user groups and as a council understand how much we're subsidizing some things that we're at. I think if we saw some of the numbers, you know, perhaps it would be like, whoa, okay, like that's off. That's way different than what I thought it was. Because right now we're just kind of, or at least I myself am just guessing. I don't know. You know, when I see that some stuff could be subsidized through taxation at 93%, that's a little too high for me. I think on almost anything. So, you know, looking to see what things are at might be a bit more helpful to determine what these impacts might be. Because if right now we're saying, okay, we should go to cost recovery on things, and that means that now, you know, to go swimming for the day costs, you know, $300. Well, that's just not going to work. So having some numbers in front of, I know myself anyway, some data would be helpful to just to be able to develop a better understanding of what administration is asking. But I do think it's an unsustainable expectation to think that we can continue subsidizing all of our activities or services at the rates that we are. Thanks.
Anybody else for the comments? Seal Beverage.
Just a point of clarification. So I stand corrected. I will always come forward with the correction. So in this particular bylaw, I just don't have it right in front of me, but that the bylaw on the schedule were to be reviewed and for amendments annually by the respective department head. But given that this item hasn't come back to council in quite some time, I'm not sure when those amendments were occurring. So just a point of clarification that we would manage that as well when it comes to the bylaw moving forward.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, it does say that in the bylaw, but there's areas within that bylaw that we've asked for a review, which has not occurred due to transitions in certain areas. So I think there's challenges. For me, I would really like to know if we could find out when some of these rates were last adjusted, because there could be huge gaps. And to me, those are the areas we really need to focus on, because in certain areas we're already increasing every year. So that would be helpful information to have as well. Go ahead, Mr. Kitlitz.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think that's a fair question by Councillor Beyer about seeing some of the data to get a feel for exactly what some of these different models might mean. I think that's a great idea, and I think that's a fair thing for us to do. I guess what we're trying to do is eventually develop a policy direction and a pattern and a model where we continue to do our 2-year reviews on frequency, and it comes as part of the budget process. And if the policy direction is clear, staff just go do the research and then bring back the fees based on that policy direction. So understanding that you might need a bit more data to give us better direction on where you want to land, I think that's fair. But I guess what I would wonder is council okay with us just taking like the ones we identified in this presentation, those 5 areas? Those are ones that we think we've heard from council that they are low. We're okay with bringing some of those back for the final budget here in the next couple of months, but the rest we'll wait and bring back to council probably later in the spring, in the summer to help inform that policy direction to prepare us for 2023 budget. Is that a fair plan of attack for right now? Does it sound reasonable?
Sounds good to me. Anybody else concerned with that? No, I'm getting lots of head nods here, so I think you're good.
So next week's council meeting. Thanks.
All right, no other questions? Thank you. All right, thank you for your presentations, and we have no other items on the agenda. Questions for media and public regarding items in this committee of the whole meeting? Go ahead, Adrian.
Good evening. I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Adrian. Can I get a motion for adjournment? Councilor Kosechny. Thank you. All those in favor, motion carried. Opposed.